Before the first shadow was cast by a man-made wall, there was only the Great Forest, a green, breathing cathedral that the Edo people believed was the physical manifestation of the divine. To understand Benin, one must first discard the modern concept of time. We must travel back to the era of the Ogiso, the kings of the sky. Legend tells us that the world began at Ahi, the place where land first emerged from the primordial waters. Osanobua, the creator, sent his sons to populate the earth. The youngest, who would become the first ruler of the Edo, was gifted a bird's shell containing earth. While his brothers brought wealth and tools, he brought the land itself. This is the foundational philosophy of the Benin Kingdom, that the land is a gift from the heavens, held in trust by the king. These were not merely political figures, they were cosmic bridges. But as we dwell on this era, we must look at the tragedy of Prince Kaladerhan. His story is the Iliad of West Africa, a tale of a mother's love, a father's misguided wrath, and a prince who vanished into the forest to become a legend in a neighboring land. His absence created a vacuum, a silence in the forest that could only be filled by a new kind of power, the dynasty of the Obas. If you were to stand above the Bight of Benin in the year 1300, you would witness a feat of engineering that defies the imagination. The Aya, or the Great Walls, were not built of stone, for the rainforest does not yield granite easily. Let us consider the logistics of moving 60 million cubic meters of earth. This was a mobilization of labor that required a level of social harmony and bureaucratic precision unseen elsewhere in the medieval world. The inner wall protected the Obas palace, the heart of the universe, while outer walls radiated outward, encircling villages and farmland. This created a protected forest where the people lived in total security. The Dutch explorer Olfert Dapper described the gates of the city as being guarded by soldiers whose discipline was absolute. The streets were laid out with a mathematical rigor that suggests a deep understanding of geometry and urban flow. It wasn't just about defense, it was about sanitation and light. The wide boulevards were kept impeccably clean, and the houses were built in a style where internal courtyards allowed the breeze to circulate, cooling the occupants in the sweltering heat of the tropics. This was a civilization that had conquered the climate. In the cooling shadows of the Igun district, the air has always been thick with the scent of charcoal and melting ore. The Igun Iranwan, or the Brass Casters Guild, was perhaps the most prestigious secret society in the empire. To be a smith was to be a magician. They used the lost wax method, a process so delicate that a single mistake in the clay mold would destroy weeks of work. But why brass? In Edo cosmology, brass does not rust, it does not decay. It is the eternal metal. When an Oba passed behind the curtain, the Edo term for death, his successor would commission a bronze head to be placed on the ancestral altar. These heads were not portraits in the Western sense. They were vessels for the Ihai, the spirit. Look at the coral regalia rendered in metal, the heavy chokers that reach the chin, the beaded caps, the symbols of the leopard and the mudfish. Every line carved into the wax was a word in a sentence of history. Since the Edo did not use a written script in the Latin sense, these bronzes were their library. They recorded every treaty, every victory, and every royal decree in a medium that would survive for 1,000 years. In the late 15th century, the horizon of the Atlantic changed forever. For the Edo, the sea was the domain of Olokun, the god of wealth and the abyss. When the first Portuguese caravels appeared, they were not seen as harbingers of doom, but as visitors from the spirit realm. This encounter was unique in the history of the Age of Discovery. It was a diplomatic marriage of convenience between two sovereign powers. Oba Isigi, perhaps the most intellectually curious of all Benin's rulers, did not fear the Europeans. He studied them. He realized that the Portuguese possessed two things Benin could use: firearms and a new source of coral. Asigi famously sent an ambassador to the court of King Manuel I in Lisbon, establishing a diplomatic tie that was respected for centuries. This was a time when a black African king and a white European king exchanged letters as brothers. But the trade was not merely for trinkets. Benin dictated the terms. They traded pepper, a spice so valuable in Europe it was known as black gold, and fine cotton textiles that were superior to many European weaves of the time. The Oba maintained a royal monopoly on trade. Nothing moved without his seal. During this era, the Benin military also evolved. The introduction of the musket, though slow to replace the traditional poisoned arrow and leaf-shaped sword, added a psychological layer to the Oba's expansion. The empire pushed its borders into the Lagos Lagoon and deep into the Igbo territories to the east. While the Obas were the face of the empire, its soul often resided in the Usulu, the court of the Queen Mother, or the Iyoba. In 1515, the empire was under threat from the Igala people to the north. Internal dissent was brewing. The kingdom was on the verge of fracturing. Enter Idia. She was more than a mother. She was a master of medicines and a brilliant political strategist. Tradition tells us she raised an army of her own and used mystical charms to strike fear into the hearts of the Igala warriors. She is the only woman in Benin history to have gone to war in such a capacity. The iconic ivory mask, which many recognize today as the symbol of Festac 77, is her face. But look closer at that mask. Above her forehead are carved figures of Portuguese sailors. This symbolizes her ability to bridge the worlds of the mundane and the supernatural, the local and the foreign. The office of the Iyoba became a permanent fixture of the Benin Constitution because of her. She proved that the stability of the throne required a balance of masculine and feminine energies. We must also explore the rituals of the Utivi, the transition of power, and how the Queen Mother acted as the ultimate protector of the Oba's head. Her legacy is a reminder that the Benin Empire was a sophisticated bureaucracy where gender, while structured, allowed for the rise of titans who could save a nation from the brink of extinction. The 19th century brought a cold industrial wind from the north. The British Empire, fueled by the steam engine and the greed of the Royal Niger Company, no longer sought equals in trade, they sought subjects. This is a tragedy of two worlds that stopped speaking the same language. By the time Oba Ramwen took the throne, the pressure was immense. The British wanted free trade, which in their terms meant the end of the Oba's royal monopolies on rubber and palm oil. The tension culminated in the Phillips Expedition of 1897. Despite warnings that the Oba was performing sacred rituals and could not receive visitors, Acting Consul General James Phillips marched toward Benin City. He was ambushed and killed. The British response was swift and total. They called it a punitive expedition, but history remembers it as a deconstruction of a civilization. For weeks, the forest echoed with the sound of Maxim guns. When the British finally breached the Great Walls, they found a city of wonders, and they proceeded to strip it bare. They took everything. The ivory tusks that recorded the lineages of kings, the brass plaques that told of ancient battles, the coral crowns of the queens. To justify the loot, the British press painted Benin as a city of blood, ignoring the centuries of order and art that had defined it. As the palace burned, the smoke carried away the records of 1,000 years, and the Oba was led away in chains, an exile in his own land. The fire of 1897 did not consume the Edo spirit. Though the walls were leveled and the king was in Calabar, the people remembered. In 1914, the monarchy was restored, proving that the Oba is not just a man, but an institution that exists within the hearts of the people. Today, the story of Benin is being written in the courtrooms and museums of the West. The Benin Bronzes are the most famous stolen artifacts in the world. From the British Museum to the Smithsonian, the pressure to return these items has reached a fever pitch. But this isn't just about art. It is about the return of ancestors. Finally, we look at the 21st century Benin Kingdom. We see the current Oba, a man of deep education and traditional weight, navigating the digital age. We look at the plans for the Imowae, Edo Museum of West African Art, designed by world-renowned architects to house the returning treasures. The Kingdom of Benin teaches us a vital lesson about the resilience of human culture. It survived the Ogiso, it survived the Atlantic trade, and it survived the fire of the British Empire. As long as the red earth of Nigeria remains, and as long as the bronze casters of Igan Street continue to stoke their fires, the Kingdom of Benin is not a relic of the past. It is a living, breathing promise of the future. The leopard still walks the forest.